Okay, right. Looks like we're live. Well, welcome to our little webinar on the impact of plastic and what that means for us. We've got Alex McGoran here with us, who is, quite frankly, a genius in this department. So don't worry, Alex, I haven't got massively high expectations or anything. But just in a minute, it's probably best if you introduce yourself, because you know yourself a lot better than I do, and I can't even say some of the words that you're probably going to say. But also, just for anyone watching, feel free to whack any questions in the comments section, and Alex will have a go at answering those, I'm sure, very well. Alex, tell us a bit about yourself. What gives you the right? Why are you so qualified to talk about plastic?
So I'm a PhD student, so I'm researching plastics right now in the River Thames, specifically microplastics, these really small fragments of plastic. I've been doing it for 5 years, not that it feels like 5 years, that 5 years went quickly. And I've been studying a lot of different animals. So I've looked at fish, crabs, shrimp, arthropods, so these really small crustaceans that live in and on the riverbed, seals and whales. So I've got quite a good understanding of a different range of animals that are affected, both in the Thames and in the sea as well.
Fantastic. So you're very qualified then.
I'm still learning, not a genius, but I'd like to think that I know a bit.
Well, we can all learn from you today. Again, anyone who's just coming along now, feel free to whack any questions for Alex in the comments section. She'll be more than happy to deal with those. Alex, tell us then, so what is plastic? Sounds like a simple question.
Yeah, so I think we all recognise a product made from plastic. So we know what a plastic product is, but knowing specifically what that material is maybe not always as obvious. So obviously it's this synthetic, durable product, something that's really long lasting, and that is sort of highlighted by this image on the right here. So you can see this hula hoops packet. And the best before date on this packet is 1986. So this crisp packet is older than I am, and you can see just how intact, relatively speaking, a 30-year-old crisp packet is. So this material, even in the environment, is a really strong, good material, but that's also what makes it so dangerous. It can be made of a variety of different things, whether this be polyester or nylon, and that's why it can be in so many different products, is that each one has its own unique properties. But what I look at specifically is microplastics, so fragments that are smaller than 5 millimeters.
Wow. Well, that hula hoops packet doesn't look anywhere near as appealing as I'm sure it did back in, when did you say?
1986, yeah.
86. Incredible. And yeah, that's actually, I find that quite an interesting picture, because it just is a picture of how a sort of small indulgence, I guess, has really long-lasting effects, which is kind of what we're talking about, but on a bigger scale. This bottom picture as well, just to clarify, that looks to me like they are 1 millimeter squares.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that bottom piece then.
So microplastics, obviously 5 millimeters it's not always the easiest thing to picture off the top of your head. So I think a really good way of kind of going, what is microplastic, is anything smaller than a grain of rice. So this is just your sort of average grain of rice, and below that, this blue sort of triangle, that is a piece of plastic, a microplastic that we took from the stomach of a fish. So actually quite a large piece, because it's about 3 millimeters, as you can see. So when it's the largest is 5 millimeters, 3 millimeters is not too far off that, given that plastic can even go to this sort of nano scale.
Wow. Okay, so how your research is not just or is quite focused, isn't it, on the Thames? So tell us, how then does the plastic get into the Thames?
So the way it gets into the Thames will be similar to how it gets into other environments, but specifically for the Thames, these are some images of the pieces of plastic that have been recovered from the Thames. So these are all from the riverbed, so right on that sediment. And you've got sanitary products, coffee cups, cigarette wrappers, food packaging, and carrier bags. And these are some of the most abundant pieces of litter, you can see that most of them are things that we handle on a regular, almost daily basis for some of these. So obviously there's a very direct littering as a way that it could get in, either people going to beaches or dropping stuff in the street and it washing down the drain. It could be, runoff from landfill or from land, so things that littering and it washing off that way. Or even just an indirect leak in the system, a broken pipe somewhere or a rubbish bin that gets dropped or something like that, and a way that, almost out of their control directly that gets fixed. And lastly, wastewater. So these sanitary pads were likely flushed down the toilet. So that's somebody putting something that shouldn't go down the toilet into a system that wasn't designed to filter those out, and then they can get into the river. Or even as simple as putting your clothes in the washing machine. Those clothes, that mechanism releases fibers, and those fibers eventually end up in the river.
Wow. I'm just looking at some of these items here, and I know I've got a couple of questions. If anyone's watching and they've got, well, not even anyone's watching, anyone who is watching, if they would like to put any questions to Alex, then feel free to just whack them in the comment section, and we'll address those as we go. I'm particularly sort of drawn, I guess, to the coffee cups and the carrier bags, because that's something that I guess is a bit of a headline. I guess they're sort of headline items, aren't they? Carrier bags a few years ago were, you got to pay for them. They're not just free in supermarkets. And coffee cups, not sure if I'm meant to say brands, but a shop that I like to go into, I can't go and get my free coffee anymore unless I take my own cup. And I like that. I'm quite happy to support that. I don't know whether cigarette wrappers and things have changed, but do you know if these numbers are coming down at all since we've been more aware?
So I think that if there is going to be an impact, it's going to take time. So obviously there's a 30-year-old crisp packet in the Thames. So it's not going to be something that we immediately see. And I think that coffee cups and carrier bags are a really interesting one, because they're something where it's really easy to make a change. You could switch to either a reusable plastic bag or a hemp bag. And obviously coffee cups, there's, as you say, reusable ones, and often there's incentives for using those. So I mean, we're in a bit of a difficult time where you can no longer bring your coffee cup into your favorite coffee shop because of restrictions in place for our own safety. But other than unprecedented pandemic times, you get 10p off every coffee, or, sometimes you get a free coffee. And I think that having those reusable cups, having reusable bags is a really easy change that will obviously reduce a whole load of litter that is entering this river and entering the oceans. Cigarette wrappers is a lot harder. I don't know how we get rid of those cellophane wrappers. Personally, I'm not a smoker, so it's not something that I use, and I don't know whether there's innovation into getting that changed. But certainly reusable products will have a positive impact. It just might take a few years before we see that impact trickling into the rivers.
Yeah, it is quite clearly a case of dealing with it now, though, isn't it? I know we were just sort of chatting earlier, and I was talking about a shop near where I live, near the office, which is a zero waste shop, and it's absolutely fantastic. It was just a local lady who was just, I don't know whether she'd sort of seen that Blue Planet documentary that everyone's seen, or whether it was before that she'd been thinking about the problem of plastic, and started by trying herself to reduce the amount of plastic that she was buying and aiming for zero. I don't know if it's entirely possible, but she really gave it a good go, and then opened this shop because she found that it just wasn't supported enough in the supermarkets. You just can't buy the things that you want to buy and avoid plastic. So she started this shop, and I've been really encouraged actually to see how many people have got behind that business, and really support it. It's perhaps in some cases marginally more expensive, and people have put their money where their mouth is because they care about this problem. I, for one, do like to kind of try and pick all the items that don't have plastic in. But it's not easy. You do
No.
still find that some things end up in the bin, and it's just quite depressing when you take something home and you want the item inside almost immediately, and that packaging it goes straight in the bin. It's a horrible feeling. But we're going to come on to that.
Companies, it's a sort of thing where obviously there's not a huge selection of these companies at the moment. There's just odd ones popping up here and there. But as those local communities support them, Tesco's probably started off really small, and eventually, because everybody supported it, it got bigger. And I think that's the thing with these zero waste shops, is that if the people in the area support them, then business gets better, and also, competition. Other businesses recognise that's what consumers want, and governments might acknowledge that these companies are doing better and go, right, but there's a market for those. What can we do to support them? So I think it's really positive when these companies start, but also really positive to see that these people, like you say, are getting behind it.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, let's move back then to the Thames, the heart of your research. Tell us a bit then about how much plastic is in the Thames.
So it's really hard to say at any given moment exactly how much is in the Thames. Obviously, it's a river, so it's flowing out to sea, so plastic is constantly moving within that system. But what we do have is evidence that there's thousands, if not more than thousands of pieces of litter in the river at any given moment. So Thames 21 is a local environmental charity. They do a lot of organised litter picking and litter monitoring on the Thames, and they only work on the foreshore. So this is just looking at the things that sort of wash onto the river, onto the shore, and not what's in the riverbed or in the water directly. But they started their surveys in April 2016, and they've recently published a report about all of their findings up until December 2019. And it's 85,000 plastic bottles just on the shore, let alone what's in the river. That's just 3.5 years worth of plastic, one type of plastic, not looking at carrier bags or anything else, just plastic bottles. And then those images that you saw on the previous slide, those were from a study done by Royal Holloway and the Natural History Museum, putting these nets on the riverbeds. They sit about knee height off the riverbed, and they just collect plastic as it sort of rolls along, really. And in 3 months, they got 8,500 pieces of litter. So, there's a huge amount both hidden on the riverbed and floating at its surface.
That's incredible. So just explain then this this image on the side. What's that got? What's going on there?
Yeah. So for my research, we're collecting fish and animals at the moment, but also plastic in our nets. So we take a boat out to the Thames and we spend a day out there. We do this every 3 months to sort of get seasonal images of what the Thames and the plastic is doing. So in just 4 trips to get spring, autumn, winter, and summer, we've got 348 items of litter in those nets. That's not what's in the animals, that's just what's floating in the river. And if we stacked those end to end, they'd be 70 to 80% the height of Big Ben Tower. And there'd be more items of litter in that tower than there would be sort of steps to reach the top of Big Ben. So it just goes to show, in really just a few hours of sampling, how much plastic we can just pull out from one tiny section of the Thames.
Right. I was just about to ask a question actually that I think you've just answered. So every time you went there to do this sample, it was how long? Just a few hours?
So we'd sample somewhere between 5 to 10, 15-minute samples. So not long at all, in just 4 days.
Wow, that's incredible. And you do that how many times a year?
4 times a year, once every 3 months. So we've got 2 more samples left to do. Hopefully one later this month, hopefully in a week or 2. I'll be out on a boat collecting plastic. Hopefully not collecting plastic, hopefully just collecting fish, but inevitably collecting plastic.
Presumably, if you're out looking at fish and you see a bit of plastic floating by, you grab it anyway.
Yeah, so we keep everything that we get in the net. So the purpose of the study is to collect the animals to see what they're eating. But obviously any plastic that we get in the nets, anything that we catch, we do keep, we record, we photograph it, measure it, identify whether it's a 30-year-old crisp packet, and then we dispose of it responsibly.
Brilliant. Well, I've got a message that's come in directly, actually, someone who's watching. It's not on the comments, but it says, are there estimated projections as to whether that will increase or decrease, and by how much?
So it's very, like I say, it's hard to tell. So there are models, people that use mathematics to sort of determine where plastic accumulates globally and how much it could be increasing. It's quite hard to say in the Thames, but certainly the Thames Tideway Tunnel is being produced, and that will update the sewer system. So we currently have a Victorian system and obviously a population that vastly exceeds what that Victorian system was ever designed to cope with. So hopefully this tideway tunnel will reduce the amount of plastic getting into the Thames. I don't know how quickly that plastic will disappear, but there'll be less going in, and obviously that's a huge positive, especially since there's PLA and Support of London Authority, sorry, and Thames 21 that do their jobs to clean the Thames, picking up litter, doing driftwood collection and things like that. So hopefully in the next few years we will see a positive change, especially with policy changing to match these actions as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so one of you sort of touched on it earlier. You're not just counting the number of sort of pieces of plastic in there, but you're looking at the impact that has on animals. So do you want to tell us then a bit about how the plastic affects the animals in the Thames?
Yeah, certainly. So I mean, in the Thames specifically, studies have mostly focused on fish. So they've only really looked at those fish species. It's a very healthy river, other than plastic. So there's 125 species of fish in the river. It's got 2 resident species of seals. It's got porpoises and dolphins that visit it. It's full of crabs and invertebrates. And we know that from my previous studies, we know that 28% of fish on average have plastic in their stomach, but for some species it can go as high as 3/4 of fish. So obviously 3/4 of a population is a really shocking amount of plastic. But when it gets really interesting for me is comparing these fish to crabs. We find that almost every crab has plastic in its stomach, and there's a lot more plastic in those crabs than there is in these fish. But whilst I have evidence for crabs, fish, and shrimp, it's likely that all the animals that I don't look at or I don't get the opportunity to look at are still affected by plastic. It's just we haven't seen it yet or we can't quantify it. But plastic's completely covering the riverbed, so there'll be sections of the river that just don't see sunlight or don't see oxygen, or animals that live on plastic or are choking in plastic. And really it will just go to show that almost everything in the Thames is affected either directly or indirectly.
Wow. And just a very light-hearted question. You mentioned dolphins in the Thames. I didn't know. That's
I
cool.
mean, the Thames is the dolphins obviously are more. I want to say migratory. I don't know if that's the correct term. They move. They're not stationary in the Thames. Obviously, you've got seals which haul out, so they live on the riverbanks and on rocks. So they sort of are in the Thames maybe longer and for more durations. But definitely dolphins do visit the Thames. I mean, Thames even has seahorses in it, so it's incredibly diverse. It's just you don't always see it.
It just looks brown to me.
Yeah, that's actually sediment. So the river is very clean. It's just this suspended mud that makes it look dirty, but obviously it gives it the impression that, oh, I wouldn't drink that, or I wouldn't, that must have chemicals in it. It must be polluted. But the color has nothing to do with the health of the river.
So the Thames is quite a clean river then, by comparison, is it? Or
Historically, it was biologically dead. So in the 1950s, there was no animals living in the Thames. The Natural History Museum declared there's no life. This river is devoid. And since then, chemically, we've reduced the amount of chemicals going in. We've treated our sewage better, and so life has come back and is actually thriving. So in terms of plastic, it's probably worse than it was, but in terms of everything else, it is certainly a lot better. So one chemical was silver nitrate, and that was something we used to process camera film and x-rays. But now switching to both digital X-rays and digital cameras means that we're not using that chemical and it doesn't go into the river.
Wow. And the photos are clearer.
Yeah.
Probably some keen photographers who are going to disagree with me.
You can take as many as you like without having to save the film.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. There's yeah. So I've just had another question come in actually, and it says, how does this affect us? I know that your study is more, I guess, on the actual plastic and how that affects the animals. Presumably, then you sort of hand over your research in a way to a medical researcher who then deals with how that affects humans. But tell me if I'm wrong. Is that something that you know a lot about?
So, as you say, it's a collaboration. The whole sort of plastic field is lots of different research teams doing their bit and sort of informing each other and informing discussion and driving where research goes. So I personally don't work on humans, but we do know some of the effects plastic has on animals, and therefore we can sort of assume what it might do to us. So plastic can contain chemicals. These can be carcinogenic, so cancer causing. They can be called endocrine disruptors, which means they have a structure similar to hormones. So usually it's estrogen, the female hormone. So if you've got a male that has higher quantities of female hormone than testosterone, the male hormone, it might have impacts on his reproduction, for instance. But it's really hard to say what impact directly it has on humans because you don't have that control study. You don't have a human that has never been in contact with plastic. So how do you compare somebody exposed to plastic when there's no sort of unexposed party to sort of test it against? Certainly we will be inhaling and eating plastic. There's plastic surrounding all of us now, from our clothes to carpets, sofas, curtains. It's all made of plastic. It will all, as you sort of wash your clothes, as you walk around, you'll disturb the carpet, and that will sort of bring in fibers into the air that you'll then inhale or will fall on your food and you'll eat them. At the moment, the amount of plastic probably isn't, high enough that it's not gonna kill us at present. But who knows, with quantities of plastic increasing, we never know how far the effect will go.
Yeah, okay. I might have jumped that last question in a bit too soon, actually, because I think the next slide tells us a bit more about which animals ingest the most plastic. So you can just tell us a little bit about that.
So as I was saying on the previous slide, the crabs were eating more plastic than fish, and so I can't say which animal globally eats the most plastic. I know that seabirds eat quite a lot, but from my experience in the Thames, crabs have a shocking amount of plastic in their stomach. So if we look at this first image, the sort of left-hand image, you've got in the top right of that this almost triangular shape, and that sort of bag is actually the crab's stomach. And I've taken two sides off of it. It's a bit like a pyramid tea bag, and I've just ripped it open. And this sort of tangle of plastics that you can see in that triangle shape, that is a tangle of over 100 pieces of plastic that are essentially filling up most of the stomach. And that's due to these, you can see on the second image, these blue arrows highlighting these almost like teeth-like structures. Crabs can't chew in the same sense we do. So obviously we have teeth that allow us to break our food up into small pieces, but they don't have that. So their stomach has these teeth-like structures that grind up their food. And when they eat fibers, that grinding mechanism seems to just tangle them into these really densely packed balls of fiber that are really difficult for these crabs to get rid of. So they can't move out of the stomach into the intestines. So they just stay there getting bigger and bigger.
Wow. And does that eventually kill them, or are we not sure yet?
So we haven't seen a decline in crab populations. So the crabs that we were looking at were actually an invasive species. So they're called the Chinese mitten crab. So obviously, as the name suggests, they don't belong in the Thames, they belong in Asia. So if there was a decline in these crabs, it'd almost be a good thing. But we're not seeing a reduction in numbers. So it suggests that they're not dying. We don't know how they're getting rid of this plastic. As I say, it's too big to sort of leave in the intestines, so they can't evacuate their bowels and get rid of this plastic. It's sort of stuck there. But there must be some mechanism by which it goes away because they are seemingly surviving.
But one thing we know for sure is it's not a good thing, is it? It's not healthy.
No.
Cool. Well, let's move on to the next one then, which I potentially came a bit too quickly onto my question. But what are the effects on the food chain?
So obviously, if you've got a stomach full of plastic, it means that you kind of feel full. You feel like you've got a stomach full of food, even if it's not nutritious. And that means you might eat less and therefore have less energy. But equally, it can irritate your stomach. It can cause physical damage. So your body has to heal those scratches and those cuts. And also plastics, as I said, for when I was talking about humans, they contain chemicals. So you're healing yourself all the time and you have less energy, therefore, for reproduction or for growth. So you might be smaller, or the next generation might have less individuals. And plastic can even carry bacteria. So you could be exposed to a disease that you have no defense for. So you might become sick. And then that will obviously have knock-on effects for the food web. Either those chemicals or those pieces of plastic will move from one animal to another as that animal's eaten. Or it could be as simple as if there's less food or smaller food, you become less healthy because you're eating less. So it is one thing that affects one area of the food web will have a knock-on effect to the rest of that system.
Yeah, okay, fine. Well, let's cut to probably the biggest question, which is what can we do about it? It's quite obvious that there's a problem. For anyone who has watched that Blue Planet episode about plastic, and that your studies are on the Thames. I think they focused more on the oceans, and well, how can we deal with this problem?
So we've got this hierarchy that you can sort of see on the side here, this pyramid structure, and I think that these are sort of, usually it's the 3 R's you hear about, but actually it's more like 4 or 5 R's that are sort of the ranked way. We should sort of start with one, and then if we can't do that, move down the system. So the easiest and probably most effective way for us to not have so much plastic waste is just to use a lot less plastic. So whether that is getting alternatives, so reusable coffee cup that's made of glass or metal rather than a plastic cup, or just saying no to a plastic straw because you might not need it. Obviously, that's not always possible. Sometimes you do have plastic or you've already bought a plastic product. So in those cases, you can reuse the plastic. So whether that's taking your plastic carrier bag to the shop every time you go, and then obviously if you use it a lot, there's a chance it could get damaged. So to repair that item, so to patch up that material so that you can use that bag again or turn it into something else. It could be upcycling, for instance. Or you've got recycling. So that's obviously, I think for many, their sort of first guess for where plastic should go is in the recycling bin. You should recycle it, but in fact, there's many steps before it necessarily gets there. If it can't be recycled, it goes into your bin, and that means it either gets sent to landfill, which is the red section that is disposed. That's something we want to avoid. Or it gets incinerated, which is recapturing that energy, so recovering the energy that was used to make it. So it's all about where your plastic item fits within that hierarchy, where you can say yes and no to plastic.
Brilliant. So really, we're all aiming for the top, aren't we? Of reducing, refuse, reuse. How disappointed are you that you couldn't find an R word instead of dispose? It's a lot.
I mean, it's the last one, so I think it's fine because you've got your sort of refuse, your recycle, dispose isn't one of the R's that we want to be reaching, so I think it's fine for it to be a D, to be a bad word that we don't want it to be, rather than one of the R's that we're aiming for, I think.
Very clever, good answer. I can see why you've got a PhD or however many letters you've got after your name. So yeah, taking that on ourselves, reducing and refusing is always ideal, isn't it? And we talked about coffee cups and straws, and or just all the ways in which we can just turn it down at source and stop using it. Obviously, manufacturers want to make money, and if people aren't buying the things in plastic, then they'll find a new way of packaging things, or just not doing it at all. And, you know, sometimes it's quite depressing when you see a multi-pack of crisps or whatever, and it's got a pack around it and then another pack per pack of crisps. It's unbelievable how much packaging there is for 20 grams of sliced potatoes. Down to the next one. This, I guess, is kind of comes on to us as Stansons, but also something that we can all do is reusing. Now's probably a good time just to mention the fabrics that we're promoting, hence why we've got this sustainability month. It's not just a month for us, obviously we'll promote them all year round, but we just want to talk about them very briefly now. It's only part of our range are fabrics for blinds and curtains, and this question isn't on here now, but it was a question that I asked earlier because I didn't know the answer, and that was that the blinds are made of 100% recycled material, which is really cool, just to know that, you know, that material that would have been in landfill or would have been bobbing around in the sea causing these problems is then turned back into a product in a very sustainable way. And curtains, interestingly, actually, they can't be 100% because then they wouldn't be a curtain. It would be quite a solid item. But for the fabric to work as a curtain, it can only go up to about 50% recycled. But I think that 50% is a lot better than zero. So they're the fabrics that we've got on offer. But you can check them out on the link, which I can see down there. You can see a bit more about those fabrics. Brilliant. Well, I think that's quite a few of our questions. I'm not sure if there are any more coming in. So unless you've got anything else that you want to add, Alex?
No, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions if there's anything that comes in, but I think that's a nice summary of the plastics in the Thames at the moment.
Well, if people do end up perhaps not watching this live, but watching it later on LinkedIn or on YouTube, then if they want to put their comments on the LinkedIn post, then I hope, I'm just sort of deciding for you, hope you don't mind answering those for us.
No, certainly. Or you can reach out to me on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is on the slide here. So if anybody is on Twitter and wants to either see what I'm doing, I post videos of dissections and photos of me on the boat. Or if you have any questions that you think of in a week, in a month's time, you can always reach out to me there or on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. Nice one. Well, thank you very much, Alex, for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for watching as well. See you later.